The sun glared off the surface of the pool, casting shimmering ripples along the water's edge. It was the perfect summer afternoon until the shouting began. I don't know who you think you are, but this is MY Pool, and I won't have some stranger lounging around like they own the place. I turned my head slowly, squinting up at the woman standing over me. A perfectly manicured hand was planted on her hip, her designer sunglasses reflecting my stunned expression. She looked at me like I was trespassing on my own property. I let out a slow breath, gripping the arms of my pool chair. "Excuse me?" She scoffed. "You heard me. I don't know how you got in here, but I suggest you leave before I call the police." For a second, I thought she was joking. I glanced around the backyard, my backyard, the one I'd paved with years of hard work and long hours. The patio furniture I picked out, the small garden I planted last spring, even the faded deck chair my father used to sit in when he visited. Everything about this place was mine. And yet, this woman stood there, brimming with confidence, acting as if I were the intruder. I stood up, wiping the condensation from my drink onto my swim trunks. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my property." She let out a high-pitched laugh, tilting her head back like I had just told the world's funniest joke. "Oh, that's adorable. You really think so?" I frowned, my patience thinning. "I don't think so. I know so." Her smirk barely wavered. "Well, that's where you're wrong." I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity. Who was she? A neighbor I hadn't met? A guest of someone I knew? As if reading my mind, she crossed her arms and gestured behind her. "My name is Karen, and I live in that house right over there." She pointed toward the two-story house next door. "And that means this pool is part of my property." A cold realization settled in my chest. She was serious. I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "Lady, I think you need to check your lease agreement because you're standing on my land." She stepped closer, her perfume wafting over me in an overpowering cloud. "Oh, I don't need to check anything. I've been using this pool for months. The previous owners let me, and I'm not about to let some random new homeowner change that." I blinked. The previous owners. I stopped mid-sentence, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The old owners, an elderly couple, had been renting out part of the property before they sold it to me. They mentioned a few neighbors who liked to borrow the pool, but I assumed they were just being friendly. But this was someone who had convinced themselves they owned what was never theirs to begin with. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my temper in check. "Look, I'm not trying to be rude, but I legally own this house and everything that comes with it, including this pool. If you were using it before, that arrangement ended the second I moved in." Karen didn't even flinch. "Oh, please. You really think some silly paperwork changes anything? I've been here longer than you, which means I have seniority." "Seniority?" I repeated, my disbelief growing by the second. "That's right," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I've lived here for 5 years. You just moved in. So, if anyone should leave, it's you." I felt my jaw tighten. This woman wasn't just entitled. She was delusional. "Let me make something very clear," I said, my voice firm. "This is my property. You have no right to be here. And if I ever catch you sneaking into my yard again, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities." She narrowed her eyes, her fake confidence cracking for the first time. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled coldly. "Try me." For a moment, she just stood there, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, with a dramatic huff, she flipped her hair over her shoulder and turned on her heel. "This isn't over," she muttered as she stomped away. I watched her retreating figure, a sinking feeling settling in my gut. Something told me she wasn't lying. The next morning, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee, hoping to enjoy a quiet start to my day. Instead, I was greeted by the sight of Karen standing at the edge of my property, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. I sighed, So much for peace. Changed your mind yet? She called out. I sipped my coffee, pretending she didn't exist. But Karen wasn't the type to be ignored. She stomped closer, stopping just before the invisible line where my backyard met hers. I did some checking, and I think you'll find that I have a pretty solid case. I raised an eyebrow. A case for what? Exactly. She smirked like she had just won a courtroom battle. The previous owners let me use this pool whenever I wanted. That sets a legal precedent. I nearly choked on my coffee. Are you serious? Very. She tilted her chin up, as if daring me to challenge her. You can't just come in here and disrupt the arrangement I had with them. That's not how things work. I took a deep breath, tried to decide if I should laugh or scream. That's exactly how things work. The moment I bought this house, any deals you had with the old owners ended. If you think you have a legal right to my pool, feel free to take me to court. Her smirk faltered, but only for a second. Oh, I don't need court. I have something better. I frowned. What the hell does that mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me with a growing sense of unease. I didn't have to wait long to find out what she meant. That afternoon, I heard splashing coming from the backyard. My heart sank. I stormed outside, and there she was, Karen, lounging on a pool float like she owned the place, sunglasses perched on her nose, a drink in one hand. I clenched my fists. You've got to be kidding me. She peeked at me over her shades and smiled. Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a pool. I gritted my teeth. No, Karen, it's my pool, and you're trespassing. She waved a dismissive hand. You weren't using it. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to keep my cool. That's not how private property works. You can't just hop the fence and take whatever you want just because no one's using it. Oh, please, she scoffed. You're acting like I broke into your house. I've been swimming here for years. I wasn't about to let some new guy tell me what I can and can't do. I pulled out my phone. All right, I tried being nice. But if you don't get out of my pool in the next 10 seconds, I'm calling the police. For the first time, her smirk vanished. You wouldn't dare. I tapped the screen. Wanna bet? She huffed and rolled off the float, dramatically wading to the steps. You're such a control freak, she muttered as she climbed out, dripping water all over my deck. I watched as she grabbed her towel. Asterisk a towel she had the nerve to bring to my house, asterisk, and wrapped it around herself. This isn't over, she snapped. Yeah, you said that already. I shot back. She stomped back toward her yard. But before disappearing through the gate, she threw one last parting shot over her shoulder. You'll regret this. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the words themselves that got to me. It was the way she said them, like she already had a plan. The next morning, I woke up to something that made my blood boil. A sign, right in front of my pool gate. A bright, obnoxious sign staked into the ground that read, Community Pool, open to residents. I blinked, thinking I had to be seeing things. But no, the words didn't change. Karen had taken this insanity to a whole new level. I marched outside, yanking the sign out of the ground so fast I nearly snapped it in half. Before I could toss it, I heard her voice from the other side of the fence. Touching public property, are we? I turned, and there she was, leaning against my fence with a smug grin. Public? I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. She nodded. That's right. I spoke to the HOA. There isn't an HOA. I cut in. She faltered for just a second, but quickly recovered. Well, I spoke to the neighborhood committee. There's no neighborhood committee either. She scowled. Well, I talked to several neighbors, and they all agree. This pool has always been a shared resource. I let out a sharp laugh. This isn't an apartment complex, Karen. This is a private home. My private home. I shook the sign for emphasis. And you can't just declare my property public because you feel like it. Her smugness returned. Oh, but I already did. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to scream. What does that even mean? She shrugged. I posted about it online. Nextdoor, Facebook, community forums, you name it. I let everyone know the new owners of this house are being stingy and trying to take away something we've all enjoyed for years. I took a deep breath, gripping the sign so hard my knuckles turned white. So let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice level. You told an entire neighborhood that my pool on my private property is open to the public. She grinned. Yep. I exhaled through my nose. You know that's illegal, right? You can't just give away something that isn't yours. Oh, relax, she scoffed. I just invited a few people. Besides, what's the harm? You have a pool. Why not share? Before I could answer, I heard voices coming from the sidewalk. I turned and felt my stomach drop. A group of strangers, actual, random strangers, were making their way toward my backyard. Towels draped over their shoulders, pool floaties under their arms, like they were heading to a public swimming facility. Oh, hell no, I muttered. The first family reached my gate, smiling politely. Hi there. We heard this was a community pool. No, I said firmly. This is private property. The father looked confused. Oh, but we saw the post online. Everyone said the previous owners let people swim here. They might have, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. But I own it now, and I never agreed to that. I don't know what you were told, but this isn't a community pool. The mother's smile faded, and she threw an awkward glance at her husband. Oh, I see. Well, sorry about that. They turned to leave, but behind them, more people were approaching. Karen giggled from her yard. Wow, look at that. So much interest. You really should consider opening it up. Think of all the good karma you'd get. I shot her a glare so sharp it could have cut through steel. You need to take that post down. Now, she smirked. Or what? I pulled out my phone. Or I'll call the police and report you for trespassing, harassment, and public disturbance. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. You wouldn't, she said, but her confidence wavered. I pressed the call button. Try me. A long, tense silence stretched between us as my phone rang. Then, finally, she huffed and rolled her eyes. Ugh, fine. No need to be so dramatic. She pulled out her own phone and started typing furiously. Happy now. I watched her for a second, making sure she wasn't bluffing. Then I hung up. But as she turned to walk away, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. This isn't over. I gritted my teeth. I had a sinking feeling she was right. The next few days passed in uneasy silence. Karen hadn't pulled any more stunts yet, but I could feel it in my gut. She was planning something. Then, on Saturday morning, I stepped outside and nearly lost my mind. A padlock, not on my gate, on my pool. I stared at it for a second, my brain struggling to process the sheer absurdity of what I was seeing. A thick, silver padlock was looped through the chain on my pool gate, securing it shut. I blinked. Then I blinked again. Karen, there was no other explanation. I marched straight to her front door and pounded on it. It only took a few seconds before she swung it open, already smirking like she had won some kind of battle. Can I help you? She asked sweetly. I gestured behind me. You put a lock on my pool, she gasped, eyes wide with fake innocence. Oh dear, is there a lock on your pool? How strange. I gritted my teeth. Karen, she sighed dramatically. All right, fine. Technically, I put the lock there. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Why? She shrugged. Because you were being unreasonable. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Asterisk, I'm asterisk being unreasonable? Yes, she snapped, folding her arms. You refuse to let anyone use it, even though everyone knows it's basically a community pool. I could barely believe what I was hearing. Karen, I don't know how to explain this to you any more clearly. This is my property, asterisk, asterisk. She scoffed. Not that the entire neighborhood disagrees. I blinked at her, genuinely speechless for the first time since this nightmare began. She smiled triumphantly, like she had backed me into a corner. See? You have no argument. So, I took matters into my own hands. The pool stays locked until you agree to be reasonable. I stared at her. Then I turned on my heel, marched back to my house, grabbed my bolt cutters, and snapped the padlock in half. Then I tossed the broken pieces onto her lawn. Her jaw dropped. You vandalized my lock. I met her eyes, my patience completely gone. It wasn't your lock, Karen, just like it isn't your pool. Her face turned an alarming shade of red. You'll regret this. I smirked. You said that last time. Still waiting. She stormed back inside, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of splashing. My stomach dropped. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled on a hoodie, and stepped outside. And there, floating in my pool, was Karen, with a drink in her hand. I stood there for a second, just watching her, completely stunned. She didn't see me yet, too busy lounging on a pool float, humming to herself like she didn't just break into my property in the middle of the night. I flicked on the flashlight. Having fun, she screamed, flailing so hard she nearly flipped her float. What the hell? She shrieked, splashing wildly. I crossed my arms. That's my question. She coughed, sputtering as she tried to compose herself. You scared me. Oh, my bad. Didn't realize I had to announce myself on my own property. She scowled, gripping the side of the pool. Look, this isn't what it looks like. Oh, because it looks like breaking and entering. She had the nerve to roll her eyes. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I pulled out my phone. Police it is, then. Wait, she shrieked, sloshing forward. There's no need for that. Look, I was stressed, okay? And I really needed a swim. I always swim at night. It helps me relax. The previous owners never minded. I stared at her, deadpan. You broke into my yard because you were stressed. She nodded, like that was a completely normal excuse. I sighed. You know, Karen, I was going to let this slide. I was going to be the bigger person. But this is the last straw. I hit dial. She gasped. You're really calling the cops over this? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. 10 minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted my yard. Karen sat on the patio, wrapped in a towel, looking absolutely furious. The officer turned to me after taking my statement. You want to press charges? Karen's head snapped toward me. Wait. Let's not be hasty. I stared at her. She had made my life hell for weeks. She had trespassed, harassed me, tried to steal my property, and now literally broke in. I sighed. No charges. Yet, she exhaled, relieved. But I continued. I will be filing a restraining order. Her relief shattered. You can't be serious, she sputtered. I folded my arms. Enjoy your community pool now, Karen. She opened her mouth to argue, but the officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, let's go. As they led her away, she shot me one last, furious glare. This isn't over, she hissed. I smirked. Oh, I think it is.